I know that I've made a few videos in the past reflecting on the 2010s in terms of movies, but I honestly felt like I missed an opportunity to talk about another subject. But since things have been slow with the current situation facing the world right now, I thought about making a video about various movies from the past decade that people at least enjoyed a lot, but I don't feel that mutual love. Now there's gonna be a few exceptions. For example, I'm not gonna talk about, let's say, Furious 7 or The Shape of Water because I've already made videos talking in really lengthy details on why I don't like those movies. Also keep in mind that I'm not going in any specific order, I'm kind of spitballing here, so please bear with me. So here are 10 movies from the 2010s that people love, but I don't. Boyhood. Now I can understand this movie being impressive on a technical level because they did have to have some actors and actresses come back to do certain filming for a certain amount of time, but did it really deserve all the praise it got and even getting nominated for Best Picture? Honestly, I don't think so. I mean, think about it. If let's say someone like myself filmed myself and some other people for about 10 to 20 minutes and I did that over and over again within about a 10 to 12 year time period and I put together the footage into a movie, does that automatically make it a great movie? And there's a strong percent chance that it would be no. Also, the other big issue that I have with the movie is that the main character is pretty neutral and pretty passive. It's been highly advised when you write a main character or a protagonist in a story, they should never be neutral or passive, they should always have some sort of goal that they want. However, it was hard for me to really connect with the main character since he's just a passive character that kind of goes with the flow and whatever is happening at that time. The Perks of Being a Wallflower. This is a movie that has at least an 8 out of 10 on IMDb. Critics loved it, and one of them said it was the Breakfast Club for this generation, or something like that. But anyway, when I watched this movie, I was pretty disappointed because honestly I feel like this movie was a bit too pretentious, so it was built more for the Tumblr demographic, for people who love drooling over Emma Watson, and also I'm not a big fan of the whole like hipster music that they played. But honestly I feel like the worst part about this movie is in the climax. There's a part where the protagonist of the story stands up to at least one of the bullies in his high school and it just hard cuts and we don't even see that confrontation happen. And I just hate that because it's painfully anticlimactic and such a cop-out. Another teen movie that honestly I think is a very overrated movie is Easy A. I felt like Emma Stone was just kind of repeating her character from Superbad in this one. Although I did like Ryan McDowell as the principal character, especially his whole rant by saying, do we really need to tweet about and post every single mundane activity we do on social media? Another gripe I have with this movie is that it's one of those typical movies where it pretty much paints one side of the political spectrum as being completely bad, and it paints the other side of the political spectrum in a completely positive way. Now, it doesn't take much imagination to figure out what I'm talking about, but at the same time, I just feel like there should be more gray area by showing both pros and cons of both sides instead of being overly black and white. For a movie that's trying to go against that, I felt like it really contradicts itself, especially when the movie is trying to be anti-label. Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. Yes, if people haven't already disliked this video or stopped watching, I can't blame you. This movie to me was a fairly decent end to the Harry Potter franchise, but I feel like there's a lot of things in this movie that either don't hold up now, or they're just kind of iffy for me. There's a lot of moments in the climax of the movie where you can tell that was meant for people in the audience to kind of cheer and laugh, but when you watch it home by yourself, it's painfully distracting and it hasn't really aged well. Also, the other issue that I have with it is that the character of Longbottom, who's been kind of the comedic relief and the butt end of jokes in the franchise, somehow is automatically the hero of the story. I felt like that was pretty forced and very unearned, at least from my perspective. On top of that, I felt like the way that Voldemort died in the movie was pretty underwhelming, and it really did remind me a lot of how Rasputin died in Anastasia, where the source of his power was this one MacGuffin, and when it's destroyed he just crumbles into ashes. The Hunger Games. I felt like the sequels were much better because it had a fairly decent director behind them. However, the first one was not, and I really did not like all of the shaky cam, and it was sadly around the time when a lot of people were trying to go for that whole like handheld shaky cam stuff, either because they were too lazy or they're trying to cut corners without putting cameras on a tripod or trying to do any sort of camera setup. Another issue that I have is because it's rated PG-13, but yet we have to see various scenes of violence in the movie involving teenagers. Yeah, it was PG-13, but it really felt very much like overly PG-13 death, where a lot of the editing choices and again the cinematography do more harm than good to display any sort of violence and carnage, showing in such a gruesome manner of people fighting to the death. Then there's a part in the movie when one of the characters gets killed off and then it causes a riot in one of the districts. I can understand why they may be emotionally stirred, but honestly, I didn't really feel that emotionally stirred by the death because it wasn't like you got to know this character that well. She didn't have that much screen time, so why should myself or any audience member that hasn't read the book be that emotionally stirred up when this character gets killed off? If you watch the 1999 remake of The Mummy, you do spend a lot of time with various side characters, so when some of them die, it really does leave an emotional impact and it's pretty effective. Black Panther. Now again, it's a movie that a lot of people love and I can understand why. However, I feel like that love is sort of misguided because I felt like the movie really suffered from the fact of the villains, especially that of Claw, where I felt like he was going to be somewhat of an interesting character, but he felt overly two-dimensional. But I didn't like that he got killed off in the movie to focus more on Michael B. Jordan's character, which honestly I felt like he was kind of overacting a bit at times in the movie. The other big issue that I have is that the main character of Black Panther, I honestly felt like he was kind of bland in his own movie. Because the thing is, I really liked the character of Black Panther a lot in Captain America Civil War, and it's kind of a shame that he was far more interesting in that movie where he was just a side character rather than in his own movie. Get Out. I felt like Get Out was a fairly decent horror movie. I did like the ending of it where I'm kind of tired of this whole trope of horror movies where we see the whole main character looks like they're gonna get out of it alive, and then there's kind of a forced twist at the end where something bad happens to him. But I'm really happy this movie really didn't do that and decided to go with a more happy ending. Other than that, I felt like the praise that this movie has gotten is just pretty absurd. I mean, come on, is Jordan Peele really the next Alfred Hitchcock? Because Alfred Hitchcock himself had to make at least several good movies before being recognized as a really great director. As for the movie itself, it does suffer a lot from continuity errors, such as one of the characters' hair just constantly keeps changing position every time they cut back to him, or the dent on the car that gets hit by a deer or a buck, I forget what it was exactly. It's on the complete opposite side when they go out to check on it. The whole movie really did come across as a ripoff of a movie called Selfless, whereas about a main character was a wealthy man who's about to die and wanted a new young man who's played by Ryan Reynolds, and it just made more sense that some wealthy guy would want to pick someone who was actually good looking and would cherry pick someone like that, opposed to picking just some random guy. Bridesmaids. This whole movie felt like a stretched out SNL skit, and a lot of the jokes were not really that funny. A lot of people just praise this movie to kind of prove some guy wrong when he was suggesting that women weren't as funny as men, and a lot of them were saying, oh, this proves a guy wrong, and sadly this kind of began the whole identity politics trend that was going on in the 2010s, and I'm really hoping that we really get past this part and just move on from it. Gravity. Again, like Boyhood, I can understand why people were swooned over the technical aspects of this movie, but come on, did it really deserve a lot of Oscar nominations, including Sandra Bullock for Best Actress? I mean, yeah, it's very impressive they try to make a lot of the scenes in the movie to make it look like one take, but keep in mind a lot of it was in a controlled environment with a bunch of effects that were not even there whatsoever. I can understand if you thought this movie was such a thrill ride if you haven't been on any of those dark rides at, let's say, the Disney parks or the Universal parks, and it's also safe to say that Gravity was pretty much that generation's Twister because if you think about it, both movies are pretty impressive when it comes to effects, but the story and the characters in both those movies feel pretty D-list. The other big gripe I have with this movie is that Sandra Bullock was nominated for Best Actress for her performance. For For what? Just reacting to things that aren't really physically there? And I know some would argue that's kind of acting in general, but keep in mind, any actress with any sort of acting skills can kind of react to anything and just say, oh, no, 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 and oh my god, oh my god. So really, what makes her performance so unique that virtually any other actress working right now couldn't really pull off? And last but not least, well, kind of least in terms of quality, at least in my opinion, is Beauty and the Beast. It's no secret that I really dislike live-action Disney remakes, because I feel like they're just there to just milk nostalgia and just there for easy money, where there really isn't anything of creative substance to them, and they're just riding the coattails of people who worked really hard to make those movies work in the first place. It has some of the most painfully obvious auto-tune I've ever heard in my life, especially from Emma Watson, and her acting is pretty bad in this movie. Also, I felt like there's a lot of plot holes in this movie, especially the whole subplot with Belle's mother, which honestly felt very pointless, and you easily could have cut that scene out of the movie and would not affect the story whatsoever. In connection to that, why was there a book that just could teleport people anywhere? It never gets brought back up ever again, and it easily could have benefited some of the characters in certain scenes. I also felt like what they did with LeFou's character was just there to kind of trick certain demographics to go see the movie, and it really did feel very forced and unnecessary, just like all the kissing scenes in The Rise of Skywalker, where you could easily just cut those scenes out of the movie and it wouldn't really affect them whatsoever. It'd be pretty inconsequential. This whole movie just felt like a complete disgrace to the animated classic of the same name, and again, it made over $1 billion at the box office, critics liked it, and sadly a lot of people just liked it because I guess it just reminded them of their childhood. I mean, think about it. If you really want to re-experience your childhood again, or kind of introduce those kinds of movies to a whole new generation, just re-watch the actual classic movies and not just this fool's errand. So anyway, that's just me giving my 2 cents. I don't think any of them are really that bad, well, except for the last one, that's just a cringe fest. But anyway, thank you for watching this video and for supporting me throughout these times, and I really hope to make a lot more videos in the future. Please like and subscribe.